So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We know that there's a lot on offer at the CSW, and you really spoiled for choice. But what we wanted to do with this event was really make this a small roundtable to enable us to have interactive discussions around financing for gender equality, and in particular, financing for access to justice. So my name is Zohra Khan, and I'm a senior advisor here at UN Women, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. So I'm really delighted to welcome representatives of government as well as civil society and our sister agencies, UNDP, to this roundtable. Distinguished guests and colleagues, we know that access to justice is shaped by fiscal and institutional choices that governments make, and those determine whose rights are realized and whose rights remain rhetorical. And in countries across the world, even where formal legal protections exist, oftentimes we see persistent underinvestment in justice systems, and these continue to reproduce exclusion and inequality. And as a result, access to justice, particularly for women and marginalized groups, remain unattainable. So we have a great lineup of speakers today, and we'll be discussing how fiscal systems can work, how fiscal systems can be shaped to really close the gap between good laws and policies and enable better and fairer access to justice for women. So in the interest of time, I won't go into the biographies of each of our speakers. They're each impressive in their own right. So I will introduce them as I go along. And I would now like to welcome our colleague Sergio Colina Martin, who's Director General for Sustainable Development Policies, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of Spain. Welcome, Sergio. And we'd ask you to give us a few opening remarks, Sergio. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for this very, of course, always timely occasion for gathering and continue thinking together for action regarding gender equality and effective access to justice. I think it's timely, of course, to have this conversation during this CSW at these also particularly challenging times that we are facing, and also to do so a little bit more than 6 months after the Sevilla conference that we had the pleasure to host last year, and where as member state, but also as hosting country, we try to push as hard as we could with, of course, the partnership with UN Women and other actors to really embed a strong gender approach to the new financing for development agenda, and to really put at the core the need to fight the feminization of poverty as one of the big challenges that we're facing, but also to have an integrated approach to gender, to everything that has to do with financing for development and sustainable development policies. But I will go a little bit more in detail later. But I just wanted to start by saying that that Spain has an explicitly feminist foreign policy and international cooperation. In fact, one of the reasons why I came accompanying also our Vice Minister for International Cooperation, and we were presenting yesterday the new feminist cooperation strategy that we just approved a couple of months ago. So I think in these challenging times of pushbacks and questionings of equality and rights for everyone, especially for women and girls, we felt it was important for us to bring specific visions and proposals on what it would look like to have an integrated and comprehensive feminist approach to the sustainable development and international cooperation. And we do so because we have always been convinced that effective equality between men and women is not just an aspiration or a distant horizon, but a necessary condition for sustainable development and for just and democratic society. So we really think it has to be at the heart of our policies and our international cooperation with our partner countries and organizations. So even in our law, the law that we passed on international cooperation in 2023, that this approach was embedded both as a thematic approach. So we really have commitments on goals, on amounts of funds that we want to devote to programs and projects specifically oriented to very clear gender equality goals, but also, and I think that's also very important, as a mainstreaming principle that interacts with the rest of our horizontal approaches on fight against inequalities, cultural diversity, climate justice, human rights. So I think these kind of approaches give a sense of what we think has to be at the core of everything that we do, regardless of the sector. But at the same time, we also think we have to invest very clearly on targeted gender equality programs. And that's why we developed this feminist cooperation strategy. It revolves around 4 axes: rights, resources, representation, and alliances as a necessary tool for making that feasible. And I think, I mean, all of them, but especially rights and resources, are also at the core of what we're talking today about effective access to justice. So I think the rights perspective for us, it's essential. And having a strong rights-based approach also means understanding what are the bottlenecks for effective access to any and exercise of those rights. And then justice with a structural gender approach is much needed, and also resources. So we really want to make sure that resources get to also civil society organizations and grassroots organizations in our partner countries, so they can also work for effective justice internally and in large civic spaces. So I think both of those perspectives on rights and resources really converge in access to justice as a meaningful tool for what we aim at, which is in the end equal access to human rights for everyone. But embracing the feminist approach means also that we believe that it has to be that there has to be a transformational approach to that. So there are many structural barriers for this effective access to happen, and then probably traditional international cooperation approaches more on just strengthening capacities, how we used to say, are not enough, because we can continue to strengthen capacities of institutions that do not guarantee effective equal access for everyone. So we really need to have a joint work to transform these structures that really, for normative or practices or institutional reasons, do not make that equal access to services, rights, and in this case also to justice, effective and equal for everyone. Connecting to Sevilla, and I will finish with that. We felt that this was very important to put at the heart of the renewed agenda, because in the end, if we think that something is fundamental, we also need to see how we collectively gather the means to make that possible. And of course, this is financial resources, but I think we also make the case that this is also knowledge, and it's important to have funding, but it's also important to enable spaces for public policy dialogue and for collaboration with all different actors, from trade unions to private sector to academy, to really gather up not just funding, which is also fundamental, but also knowledge and experiences to make sure that we get to persons and communities. And I just wanted to mention, this is another important line that we have been pushing: localization of the SDGs. And I think it makes also very clearly the case for effective access to justice, because in many countries, justice systems have also different levels, and different levels of government are implied. And if you just have, let's say, an average look and just work with maybe central ministries and organizations, you fail to really achieve transformational effects at the community level. So we really think it's important to have this territorial approach, where we understand jointly what are the obstacles really specifically in the different territories, communities, and then work also with local, regional government institutions to ensure that access to justice is from the grassroots level to the most state-centric level of institutions. And then to conclude, I think Sevilla was a really interesting space where we, despite the not very optimistic initial scenario and the pushbacks for stronger gender-sensitive language, I think we managed to put some transformational elements there. I think the importance of the care economies and policies was very much embedded in the agenda, and I think it has a lot of traction to really ensure equality. But also we have been working with young women, and we put in place a specific initiative to really move forward on gender-sensitive financing for development, including from budgeting to a different series of elements, which I think, and I conclude with that, really tackle all those structural elements that I was mentioning at the beginning. If we don't have fiscal more just fiscal systems that ensure enough resources for public services, but also that are well designed to redistribute fairly resources, I think then effective access to justice will not be possible. So I think it's a step back, but a very important element for really tackling the structural roots of and removing the obstacles for access to justice. So those were just a little bit of some elements that I wanted to share with you. This vision on the connection of rights and resources on access to justice, and this transformational approach. And I think the important agreement that we managed to reach around the Sevilla commitment to really put this also in terms of financing for development, and to really tackling elements that are not just specific projects or programs, but really going to the deep levels of structure, be it taxes, budgeting, etc., and really also the localization dimension to really make sure that we're just not talking with big ministries of justice, which is very important, but also all different levels of access to justice closer to the communities, and to also the specificities of challenges for accessing justice, which are different depending also on the territories. And we know that we have this SDG on inequalities among countries, but also inside countries, and this dimension of internal inequalities and disparities is also very important to have into consideration if we really want to have impact on access to justice. So
Thank you very much, Sergio. You can clap for it, because
Done.
But I think that was excellent, Sergio. I mean, indeed, we are in incredibly troubling times, just in the past week, and I think that's even before this, the geopolitical tensions, the fact that we were seeing an increase in military spending, we were seeing a decline in aid, we were seeing trade tensions, tariff tensions, and all of that. And that, of course, reduces the fiscal space that governments then have to invest in, not just access to justice, but the whole kind of array of public services that we need. But we're very solutions oriented in this roundtable. So we're going to look at what some of the solutions are. And I'm super excited to hear from you, Esmia Kenja, who's the Principal Secretary, Ministry of Local Government in Malawi, linked to some of the points that you were making around localization. And Malawi has a really interesting experience. So the late Senior Chief Teresa Kachidamoto was popularly known as the child marriage terminator, and showed how transformational traditional leadership can take place. She annulled 3,500 child marriages. So we're really interested to hear a little bit more about that, Esmia. What were some of the fiscal and structural barriers that she tackled as a terminator to end child marriages?
Yeah, thank you so much, Chairperson. Good afternoon. Indeed, I'm the Secretary for Gender, Children, Disability and Social Affairs. And as a preamble, I want to say that our ministry is responsible for people who are vulnerable, the different forms of vulnerability, starting from single mothers, girls, and the issues that she's referred to. Child marriage has been high in Malawi. It was at 42%, but with the strategies that we are using to end child marriage, we've reduced to 37%. And we're looking forward to do more, because now we have developed a national strategy to end child marriage. And then our aim is to make sure that these vulnerable people, persons with disability, albinism, and all sorts of vulnerability, we build their resilience. So in terms of financing and promoting access to justice. We have a story of Chief Kachinamoto, who died on 28th August 2025. May her soul rest in peace. But she has left a legacy that has left Malawi thinking to say, if one person could address 3,500 girls, taking them out of marriage, what if more women, more chiefs? So we are thinking and strategizing to say, let's learn from this legacy of one person. So in her fight as a terminator of child marriage, there were struggles that have unveiled through her experience. And I'll start with the fiscal complaints, the constraints that were there. We've noted that the enforcement system, because we work with referral systems, the enforcement ecosystem remain poorly, lowly, and funded, because at every level we have horizontal and vertical. Vertical, horizontal. Sometimes I confuse vertical and horizontal. But structures running from the community to the district headquarters to the national, and then even at those levels, we also have horizontal issues. So I'll start with those that, and then access to justice require transportation to access, especially think about the service user, the child has to start from after the violence. They need the hospital, they need evidence, they need the referral to find a safe place. So you need to move, then there's an action that they have to take to access. The issues of distance, all these require resources. So think about a user who is already vulnerable, who is poor. It just complicates. That's another physical issue. And then when you start the process, because in terms of child marriage, we have interventions that are preventive and that are also protective. So when there's a survivor, there are processes that require, like filing cases, the issues of medical reports, the issues of documentation. You would wonder how sometimes this can be complicated, because somebody would say, I need a fee for me to process your record, So these are issues that are preventive. Systems are not like well funded, so that these issues are like automatic, like the way they are done in the West. So access to justice could actually drill. And then the community based, I'm now referring to the very lowest grassroots level, the village setting. Normally, our service providers are volunteers. And voluntarism sometimes can be non-functional, because you are depending at somebody's will to commit to do it. And if somebody is committing at the expense of their own earning a living, that's where the problem comes. So the whole thing is slow. There is actually issues of delaying, because there is no remuneration for this person. So voluntarism requires at least somebody to be remunerated, because they need to earn a living. They have a family, but you are caring children, other people's children, and you live your own. So that's another issue, which if we are working hard at it, so that our voluntary people who are supporting girls, who are working, supporting ending of child marriage, are in the government payroll, so that we have a system of rewarding the work they are doing. And we also have structural gaps in social services. In the ministry where I work, we have so many assistance officers. The extension is very good. It starts at the district level. And then we have child protection workers. We have victim support units. We have well structured, but they're not funded. So as we go lower, the funding, as it trickles down, you get less and less. But I have good news at the end of this, because the new government has done something which we missed many, many years ago. So I'll come back to this. But at the moment, we are at this stage where this community-based response systems are poorly funded. And they talk about the issues of finding a shelter for a survivor of abuse. So you're thinking about psychological counseling in those environments. Very difficult, very difficult. And we had the cases where, imagine it's a biological father or maybe a stepfather sexually abusing a child. That's the case that we last resolved when you are coming, because this child now cannot go back to this home. So you have to immediately take this child out of this home, and finding a bed, finding food, finding a school, it's not easy. We need to sort out these structures. And then the third issue I want to talk about is the issue of funding for reintegration. Reintegration is the whole process, summarizing like the networks that I've talked about. How does somebody move from get support for psychological, finding education support? If it's an older girl or a boy, you need vocational skills. So these require a proper referral and network mechanism. And there is need also for coordination of service providers. In this issue, there is a school, there is a social fair, there is a hospital. At national level, at district level, at community, we have these layers, but they need to be coordinated so that we quickly resolve an issue of us accessing to justice. So that's the kind of cobweb that we are living in, horizontal and vertical. The structures are not well coordinated. And then, the timeliness is a big issue. The quicker you resolve the issue, the quicker you help the vulnerable person, the better. Because what happens with child marriage, when the victim, discovers that the process is getting too long in terms of time, they think, maybe I better go back to the abuser because this is not working. And with people who are vulnerable already, they think, I think that man, if that man was a breadwinner, even if he was a perpetrator of abuse, that slowing process takes them back to the abuser. And so in that way, access to justice is minimized or even closed. And then we're also thinking about long-term monitoring. The process is long. You start with a young person, this person is growing, and we need structures that are well established, that have good referral mechanisms, that are well funded and united and coordinated. So with all these issues of fiscal and structure, the result is that you have delayed justice. I have forgotten the delay that we have with our magistrates to resolve abuse cases of the abused people, because it's also another area that needs coordination, because our social affair is an entry point. They're the ones who identify who spot the problem, and then they need to refer to the hospital for evidence. They need to take them to courts. So because we have limited number of magistrates who are dealing with these cases, there's always delay. Yeah, so I think in our local level, community-based, what delays is the mediation. When people want to resolve informally the cases, there's always time that causes delay. So informal mediation and traditional counseling, and even sometimes people say, you're just wasting your time. This man is your husband anyway. What are you doing? Stop it. So those are some of the community. This is about culture now. Culture disturbing access to justice.
I'm going to stop you there. That was so powerful, and I think you unpacked so many different layers on.
Can I have just a minute?
you can have another 5 minutes.
Oh, all right. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, and
I will use that one for the good news. Let's affect the good news.
I was just going to say this is like a cliffhanger series. Yeah, end a series on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So please hold on to
All right.
that thought.
Thank you.
But I want to maybe go on to Faith, Faith, if I may. Faith Mangweni Powell, who's CEO of Girls Not Brides. So you do a lot of the kind of work that Esme is talking about. And my question to you is that we know that justice systems fall short in responding meaningfully to the needs and rights of women and girls, even if you have a kind of cobweb structure and so on. There's no financing for it. But in your work, what would you see as the most significant barriers to ending child marriage? And what does this reveal about some of the deeper structural or systemic challenges that you have to address?
Great, that's a great question. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here and all protocol observed. I think for me, the greatest challenge is context. I think context in the sense that laws come in place underpinned by already prevailing gender norms. So if laws don't come in a place of transformation, in a place where we want to transform the communities we work, then they are not going to address the problems the girls and women face. If laws come to protect rather than to offer people freedom and choice, if we have seen that most countries, they want to protect women and girls because they are vulnerable, they don't have freedom to choose. While actually, a law should give you freedom to choose. Should give you resources. It should give you protection. You should feel safe. You should feel like you have access to justice rather than feeling that you have to be the one, exactly what you're talking, Esme, about people having to take action, and yet you are the one who have actually been violated. So the law is not actually even helping you to access the resources you need to be able to address some of those things. So some of the challenges we have seen is that our laws are not gender transformational. They do not really look at the values of women. They are really reinforce some of the values and the norms which are already are prevailing in a country. And that is the greatest barrier we have. We have also seen many countries adopting laws because it's the thing to do, because that is what they have heard is needed. So it becomes a tick box exercise where, okay, now we have a law, it's on the shelf. And there are so many countries, even across the world, who have laws against, for example, child marriage. But none of those laws are being implemented. They are not being enforced. There is not even a system to make sure that the law is implemented. There's not even an awareness of the law, that even the people who are supposed to be served by those laws don't even know that child marriage is illegal. And there are many people we have had arguments with saying, this is our culture, this is our tradition, this is our system. And we tell them, actually, it's illegal. And they're like, why are you penalizing me for my culture? So it becomes kind of a difficult conversation. We have also seen laws which punish and stigmatize and isolate the people who are intended to support or to protect. When women are, and you've said it, Esme, as well, when girls who are violated have to give evidence that they are violated, they have to actually bring the perpetrators to court. It becomes the responsibility of the person who is actually in an abusive situation to provide the evidence. You know, I really liked what the First Lady of Sierra Leone was saying yesterday, that if you are part of a child marriage, even if you bake the cake, you are in violation of the law. Even if you attended the wedding, you're in violation of the law. Even if you were in some conversations, you are in violation of the law. So that laws are not isolating just the women and girls. They are looking at a wider community because that is where they need to have them. The other point I see is that the voices of those affected are not involved in the development of some of the justice systems which are needed to protect them. So their voice, their needs are not heard, they are not represented, and they are not even part of that conversation. There is great lack of awareness of what these laws mean. Absolutely nobody knows what the laws mean because they are also written in legal jargon, which not many people understand what is supposed to do it. There is no resources to even do the For example, if you think about, let me use a country like Malawi. If you think about a country like Malawi, and many countries have similar structures, there is the national, there is subnational, there is community. There are some really well-established structures. But if people within those structures don't understand what they are supposed to do, what is the referral system, what is the process, then the law cannot be implemented. But I also feel that laws are also put in isolation to other issues. If we want girls to be protected, we need to provide services.
Yep.
There is no option to go. Do the girls have access to education?
Yep.
Do they have access to services? Do they have access to resources? And I like some of the work IPP is doing about really women participation in budget, because that empowers women to make choices. If you are involved in some of the political conversations, then you have an opportunity to actually share what is happening to you. So I think this participation transformation is critical, and those are the critical barriers we are seeing. But also, one of the things I always talk about is government leadership. I'm impressed by Malawi again, and I'm not saying this because they're around the table. We have seen incredible leadership from Malawi in terms of the work on child marriage. And we have seen, and that leadership is needed across many countries, because if we don't have that, us as civil society or the advocates who are work in a vacuum. So that leadership is needed, because then that partnership really brings things to bear, but it's not common. It's not everywhere you go and you have support from the government. And that is a big barrier in really bringing justice to the women we want to serve. But participation, again, Sergio, really you talked about resources, participation and right. And I think that representation is having the voices of those who are being served. Yes.
Great.
Hope
Thank you so much. No.
I'm trying to talk quickly so that time is...
Yeah, but I want to pick up now, obviously, on the point that you raised around resources, and turn to Ana Patricia Munoz, the Executive Director for the International Budget Partnership, because a strategy that we've been using as feminists has been gender-responsive budgeting,
Yes.
right? And it's a strategy that looks at mainstreaming gender equality objectives in the national and local budgets as well. And we've had mixed success with gender budgeting. So I'd like to pose this question to Anna, and it's about GRB. So we've seen that a lot of the practice from around the world, the results are quite limited in terms of outcomes, positive outcomes for women. So there's been lots of technical work on gender budgeting, but it's been limited to kind of tagging expenditure, but not really measuring outcomes or the performance of the budget, right? Whether the budget is doing well or poorly for women and girls. So from your experience at IBP, what gaps or challenges are you observing? And what does this tell us about how GRB can be more transformative for women and girls?
Thank you so much. And thank you for the partnership and for bringing us here. And it's been great just to get in here. It's been fantastic process. As we were thinking about this session, and my colleague Cindy Romero is right there. She's been thinking about this with Zohra as well. I was like, how do we even make the case that this can make it to CSW with an overarching theme of justice? Like, we first need to make the case that justice and then social justice cannot exist without economic justice. And to get to economic justice, we need fiscal systems that recognize, understand, and then change, because they are built above structures that are unequal and discriminatory. And then everything else follows from that. The lack of participation, who has power, who has agency, who has the economic means to even get to justice. Everything is derived from that. But I don't need to make the case, because the case has been made. Sergio, Esme, and Faith have made a fantastic job in showcasing the importance of that. So on the gender responsive budgeting and frameworks, one of the challenges, as Faith has mentioned, is that this has become a tick in the box exercise. And apparently I think we're all to be blamed, right? Like the conventions, and I come from Ecuador signs everything. I think we've signed, we don't even know. Like, tell me, we're the first one to sign anything on environment, on gender. Like, we go and sign. And then to tick the box so that when we have the SDG 6 or whatever SDG coming, we're going to show that we made some progress, but there's no deep transformation. So 3 challenges that we could mention among many. So as you mentioned, more than 100 countries, as UN Women has shown, have some kind of gender responsive budgeting process. But that has been limited sometimes to tagging some budget lines. It has not gone deeper to how we monitor and how we measure quality, and then how lives are transformed by this. And that is also partly because communities that have been marginalized, and especially girls and women, do not have the opportunity, the meaningful spaces across or throughout the budget cycle to really influence decisions. And those decisions should come from the design, through the implementation, through the monitoring. When we talk about budget, it's not just the budget that is approved at the parliament in most cases. It's what happens before and after. It is about limited resources. Public finance and economics is the premise that there's unlimited needs and limited resources. What we forget to say is that this is within a context of inequality, where sometimes the limited resources are not the problem. It's the political will that is the problem. And so that main gap of lack of participation is important, and we can then share the solutions about how, even in this highly complex topic, women and girls have been able to transform the way fiscal systems work. So we'll get there. The second challenge that we've seen is that even in countries where you have budgets with lines that are approved for basic services that are fundamental to then access justice, or for gender-specific budget lines, one thing is what is approved, another thing is what is executed. And I'm not even talking about the quality of the execution. I'm just talking about the execution itself. This is called budget credibility. So governments underspend or overspend throughout the year. That's normal, as it should be. This cannot be rigid. However, in our research, we have found that the sectors where you find most underspending are, you can guess, gender, water and sanitation, environment. If we stop and are happy with the check in the box that we got this line in the budget and we don't follow through, we're not getting to the solution. But following through means really having a problem-driven approach and working with civil society, not to find the problem and complain, which is good, is to find the solutions. Why are governments underspending? And we'll get to the solutions in the second section. And finally, as Sergio mentioned, the Compromiso Sevilla, one of the things where, the language was not exactly what we wanted, but I thought there were a lot of meaningful conversations, even more than just the document, on domestic resource mobilization. And we've been just now talking a lot about the expenditure side of the budget. We cannot forget the revenue side of the budget. And here again, women are disproportionately affected by the way tax laws or domestic resource in general is implemented. No surprise, because its bills on their structures are unequal for centuries. A quick example here, and with that I'm going to end. For example, a lot of countries want to, and with good reason, raise more money because in a lot of countries, especially from the global south, the informal sector is very large. So you may think, I'm going to go to a market where there's a lot of informal, quote unquote, women who sell their things there, and because they don't pay tax. Like that may be the normative thing to say. Where we don't realize, if we don't speak with women who sell things in that market, is that they are being taxed at multiple levels, and that is not even counted for. They pay fees here, they pay tax to the local government here. If you count that, they're actually paying more taxes than a high-income individual at the national level. And so that's why it's so important not only to increase revenues, which is important to close the deficit, but it's important to ensure that all voices, especially those of women who are affected disproportionately by policies that have been discriminatory, have a role in deciding what that can look like in the future.
Absolutely. I think that's a great intervention. Anna, and also another aspect of the gender budgeting work that we always talk about is this lack of kind of analysis of the tax side of the budget. So the go-to is let's look at the informal economy, and let's tax the informal economy. But that might not be the best way to generate more resources from at the national level, at least. So those are incredibly important points. I'd like to move back now to Esme, if I can. And you left us with a cliffhanger. So if you could
We need the good news.
tell us, yes, tell us what good news, what did you overlook? What was the blind spot that the new government saw?
Yeah. I will talk about Chief Kachindamoto first,
Sure.
then about government support. We know that with the geopolitical issues, Malawi is not spared. So the donor space is shrinking, and now like developing countries are waking up and saying, what do we need to do on our own? So that's my starting point. So what else we are saying is, we know the legacy of Chief Kachindamoto, and we are using that to make a case. Actually, we are developing a fund called Chief Kachindamoto Fund, because the people already are motivated and encouraged that her model is working. So we are looking at a community-based model, which was depending on central level funding. But now we are saying, let's have a fund and have an innovative local-based model, which is accountable. What's key is it's accountable because it's already embedded in the grassroots level. That means it has formed a local-based safety net within the village. So the fund, we are working with UN Women to come up with this fund, and we already have started. Donors are coming, and I can also foresee around the table, I'm seeing also donors on this table. So I'm also mobilizing resources through this table. So what we are saying is, in that case, what does it mean to a girl who is caught up in this abuse, is forced to be in marriage? What it has done is that it has localized justice. Remember, I was saying that the networks have no funding, the referral systems have no funding. So we are saying, if this fund is there, it's not used at national level. It's going down to the base. That's where the good news is. And it has a long-term socioeconomic base and for easy monitoring. So it is a solution to the problems that I highlighted earlier on. It's a model that is predictable, for the community to utilize, to tap upon, instead of waiting. So the victims would tap on this resource. They would get school fees. It's a continuum kind of assistance. But what is more exciting about funding is that the new government of Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika has done something that is new. In the past, a lot of large amounts of funds were hanging at the central level in the ministries. What this government has done, he has taken almost like, is it 80 or 70% of the resources to decentralization. And not at the headquarters, but to the community. So the lowest level structure is getting, for example, for women, there is 45,000 like US dollars at constituency level by one MP. So all the MPs are getting something. Women can tap as a loan to manage their homes. And then even the youth have the same amount. And then we have a big chunk, I don't know how much it is, the 5 billion in US dollars, which is moving from the central office to the grassroots. Actually, I'm one of the leaders at the central level. I was kind of agitated to say, how are we going to operate without this?
Yeah.
But what we are seeing is, the problem is not there.
Yeah.
The problem is down there. So this is good news for us. And then there is a free secondary education for the first time, because we only had free primary. So they are not paying for anything. Not tuition, whatever, books, material, everything is covered. What will prevent a girl child from attending education? That's powerful human development. So what we are seeing is that if this model works, then we are well and good. And on our partners as well, because child marriage has gone worldwide, that it has been the highest in Malawi, we have an opportunity, and one of them is safe. We are working with SIF, we're working with other partners, and I hope more partners will join this fight, that our girls have hope, that we have partners. Even locally in Malawi, we're working with UN. We have UNICEF, UN Women, UNDP, all these UN partners. They are working with us, supporting us technically, supporting us with the resources. We know they're also hit financially. But because we are fighting as a united Malawi, all partners, all stakeholders at different levels together. So what I can assure you is that we are winning. We are ending this child marriage because we are surrounded by opportunities. The government is committed. Our partners are committed. Even at the local level, there are now wiser ways of using the same domestic funding. So I think I really want to end with that good news, that we are on the right path, because we know what we are doing. We know the problem. We know we have the strategies. I think SIF is there to witness that we have developed these strategies, national work plans, policies, which well articulated. So the direction, we see light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Esme. That was fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing that kind of promising model. And it shows what can happen when there's political will and adequate funding and so on. So thank you so much. And we wish you the very best of luck with taking that forward. But Faith, maybe I could move on to you because we've just heard of this very promising model. But what else can we do to motivate governments to act in that kind of way?
I think that it's important to have government as partners. I always say that if you look at the past, when we did government advocacy, government accountability, we were looking at government as the enemy we need to fight because they are not doing their job. But I think that has changed. We need to make sure that we are creating strong partnerships with governments and be there as allies and partners to work with them. But I think also there is need for us as civil society to work together. When we come as a competition, we are all pulling on our own different things, is to realize that all the things we do have an interaction. So if we can find common ground, and then we come as a united ecosystem in a country, whether it's education, whether it's climate change, whether it's environment, whether it's budget, whether it's gender, if we can all come together as a national ecosystem of development, we have better chances of really maximizing the minimum resources we have and being able to respond. We are in a time in the world where resources are declining. We are seeing more closures than new initiatives. We are seeing really great programs being cut. But I think this is not the time for panic. This is the time to say, how can we actually maximize whatever we have, whatever we can bring together and build those strong partnerships. But what we ask also the government is to provide leadership. Because where there is leadership vacuum, then we are all working in a vacuum. So I think that accountability and also having very clear milestones on what we are actually working towards. Because sometimes we can have a big program, but nobody is clear. What are we actually working towards? And budget accountability, really being transparent. So I sit on the board of IDP and I love IDP, by the way. Yeah, don't say that now. I do.
Keep it coming.
Yeah, I love IDP and I talk about you guys a lot. But it's really this budget transparency. I think that transparency is not just for the government, it's for the civil society, it's for the public participation, because if people know what's going on with your government, they will actually be allies and partners. If there is suspicion and people don't understand what is going on, they actually become they are not part of the solution. So really having those moments of joint planning. Again, we've done that in Malawi, where we are co-creating the work happening in Malawi specifically to end child marriage. This is a model we do across all the countries we work, that we partner with government and say, okay, you have a strategy. How do we co-create a response? So we are responsible for something, the government is responsible for something, we are holding each other accountable. It's a solid partnership. And that is what is needed. That's what we need to look out for. That is how that will work. And really making sure that there is awareness, there is knowledge, and also working. And I know some of these things are also political. It's also making sure that you're working at the political level, but you're also working at the technical level. Because when the politics change, you sometimes have to start at the beginning. But if you have very strong technical support, then the work is already embedded in the strategy. It's not something then you need to figure out who do I need to talk to. That work continues. So working on political, technical, but also the community level, and making sure those structures are there. And we have seen it work. Malawi has reduced child marriage from 42% to 37%. Now you want to go into 24% in the next 5 years.
Yes.
And I think there is hope. There are things which are really working to make that happen. I've seen other countries, Colombia, who have had a progressive child marriage law, this without exceptions, including everybody. People have really levels of accountability. And for me, that accountability is what is going to make us win.
Great, thank you, Faith. A few messages I got from you. One is around multi-stakeholder partnerships. I think that's incredibly critical. But the other was you just gave me a little bit of hope, because one feels so despondent these days about the backlash.
Yeah.
And then when you say don't panic, I think that's incredibly important. Rather than panic, we need to organize. We need to think about doing things in different ways. And I think this is the example that we see so clearly from Malawi, the example of building from the ground up, of localization, as Sergio also mentioned in his opening remarks. So to you, Anna Patricia, we know that IBP works so well with civil society organizations, and you're really quite a master in the kind of multi-stakeholder space. So could you share with us some of the good practices from your work, and what can we learn from your work in terms of the CSW70, which is a critical moment for the world?
And a little bit following the trend of not losing hope in these desperate times, which they are. What we have found, ironically or surprisingly even for us, is that even in places where there's restrictive civic space or more authoritarian governments, even in what so-called democracies, is that the budget becomes the space to engage. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second one is that when things don't work at the national level, sometimes the local, as we were mentioning, local level is the place to see innovation, to see these multi-stakeholder groups working together without losing sight of how the public policy can be changed or enforced at the end. The third one is about really becoming real, about what problem we want to get solved for. I mentioned before the problem about budget credibility, which again could be partly because the government is inefficient, because there's no connection between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Health. Sometimes they don't talk to each other. Sometimes IBP needs to host a meeting so that the Ministry of Education meets the budget secretary, and they don't even know that there was a debt management office, that debt matters as well. So even within government, playing a role of catalyzer, because we believe the government is part of the solution, it's not the enemy. I think that's important. And so in this particular example, what we found, for example, in our in-depth country work, in particular in Indonesia, in South Africa, in Nigeria, and in Senegal, is that we saw an increase in spending in health specifically, for example, for up to 75% in some primary health centers, because we went down the chain of what the problem was. So was a problem of procurement. So then we built a chat box. So we used artificial intelligence to help communities that may not want to even say what procurement is, to understand what the procurement problem is. But then the problem may be also that there's a law that says that local governments should get funds, but they need the local government to match this fund to trigger the disbursement. And the local government didn't know that or didn't do it on time. Or there's a problem on underspending mostly on infrastructure, and infrastructure has a different kind of understanding. So it's really getting down to it. And finally, for us, there's something very important, is revaluing and putting at the center community-generated data. Done in a way that's systematic, that is rigorous, and that now, as we speak, supreme audit institutions in places like South Africa are asking, not us, our partners, to provide data so that they do oversight on, for example, water and sanitation. Like something they could never even dream of, that the supreme audit institution is coming to the community to ask for the information. And we're seeing this in so many places and different contexts. So the work that has been done in Morocco on going deeper in gender responsive budgeting, to also pushing for tax laws that include a gender lens, to working with parliaments. We don't talk enough about parliaments at its different levels, and that's what they are doing, our partners there. In terms of working collaboratively, locally, nationally, but also within and among countries. We're seeing some partners in North Macedonia that have worked in the region, in the Western Balkans, to change the VAT laws that were taxing women products at 18% when the VAT was 5%. So going beyond borders is important, and we have seen it work. So to sum up, because we have a ton of examples, at the end of the day, it's about scale. Just this year, with the work we're doing in in-depth country work, 14 million people have been able to access better services. The most basic ones: water, health, now education, so that then they could access justice if needed. So for CSW, I think it's about moving from tagging and superficial way of measuring to really performance-driven decision-making and quality. It's about this multi-stakeholder approach, but that is really bringing us together to solve a problem. And that problem, we need to come to the table with thinking we don't know what the contributing factors are. I think coming in with humility and say, okay, let's find solutions to this. And finally, as I always say, these public finance and PFM issues may seem too technical, but they shouldn't be. And so bringing grassroots organizations, building trust, and building budget literacy over time, I think can give us the hope that we were talking about before.
Great. Thank you so much. And on that very hopeful note, I'd like to open the floor to your questions. I was just looking at the time. I was listening to you, but I was also keeping my eye on the time. We have 10 minutes, and we'd like 2 interventions from the floor, and then we open this up for discussions, because I'm sure you have a ton of questions for the panelists. So I'd like to start with Post Feminista, with Laura. And then, sorry, Laura, just before you start, and then the New York City Independent Budget Office with Tanya. If you could kick us off, Laura, and then Tanya.
Well, thank you, and thanks for this. Is so interesting. I'm learning. I couldn't take notes like fast enough, so if there are notes, I would love the notes. Just some reflections of like some of the things we're mentioning, and it's Faith, you were mentioning something that I strongly believe in, that it's like you need to engage civil society and budget transparency, and if you want governments to fulfill and to hold accountable, like they have to be transparent and show the budgets. But in order to do so, because transparency for governments, it takes not only policy will, but also time and effort. And you need civil society demanding that information. And I know like some cases where like we were holding this training the other day where this lady said, you know what happens to me? We asked for all this budget information, and then the Minister of Finance says, you know, the only time where someone is looking on the website for the information is after a training for 6 consultations, and then for years there's no one asking, like checking that information. Then like we're investing all this time and no one's checking. No one's holding us accountable. Why doing it? So with that, like that's the role that we have as civil society, to keep working the whole time. So we demand information, because then they're not gonna do it. So that's one of the things that we really like. I was thinking about it and how it works both ways. And then the other thing, and it goes to also the experiences of budget credibility, and I really like that concept and understanding why there's all this underspending, and it's true. It's like it's always on these issues, and the experience we had from Foster Feminista shows the same data. is that sometimes and what you were saying is because local governments don't even know that they're getting the budget for those purposes. And sometimes the experience we have with local groups doing the oversight, like the local budget monitoring, is that the central governments love that information. It's like, I don't know, I transfer the funds and I don't even know, and they don't have the capability to go on the ground and check if the budget is actually being spent on the purposes they're supposed to. So again, the role of civil society, like on that local oversight, I'm thinking of government as I like what you said, the government is a partners and they want that information. They want to be more efficient. It's not that they want to transfer. We have this example of Mexico. It's huge because like they transfer the money. So in the accounting system, once the budget goes to the local governments, it shows as spent because they spent the money, they transfer the money. But then they sign different commitments, and you have to follow the agreement and understanding. And it's so hard to follow up and monitoring that up. And if the budget is not spent, they have to return the funding. But it does not go to the gender issues that were supposed to. It goes to the general treasurer.
Yeah.
So it's all the money is not used for the purpose. It's lost in like this black box. So it's like, how can we? Again, it goes back to the budget credibility and the need to local oversee. Those are like, and I feel very inspired by the stories about Malawi, and I was just thinking about GBV, like the gender-based violence, and the inefficiency of not only from a human rights and gender rights perspective of revictimizing, I'm saying it wrong, right? Revictimizing the women during the whole process. It's also from the budget perspective, it's so inefficient. Like women had having to go through all the different circuits once and again and over again. Like it's the amount of budget that it's so inefficient and it's violating human rights. So one of the things we are working actually with the IBP and other partners, it's to create budget arguments to give women a voice to talk about technical levels. And I'm like, if we're gonna be technical, let's talk about if you want to be not using or re-victimizing the women along the GBV process. It's not only wrong, it's budgetary inefficient. You're losing money. So when you start understanding those arguments, it creates a different level of engagement. So we hope to keep working on that.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I want to move on to Tanya. Tanya, we've seen just in this city a masterclass in identifying a problem and kind of finding solutions for it through the new mayor, Zohra Mamdani, who was just, I thought, quite brilliant in identifying issues that New Yorkers are facing, which is around affordability for childcare and for transportation and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the Independent Budget Office?
Yeah, so we're an independent fiscal monitoring agency for the city. And I think something I'm hearing a lot that inspires my work, and I just want to double down on the love for International Budget Partnership, because I was very inspired after talking to them to change even how we communicate about the budget. But we're meant to provide budget transparency, and there's a tick the box element to the New York City budget being transparent. It has a very specific budget cycle. It has multiple documents that you can all find online. They're all equally unreadable. And there's actually a book that we're reading now internally as part of our book club called Budget Justice, that's written by Celine Sue of CUNY, where the first chapter is talking about how unreadable these documents are, that then extends itself to how can you actually hold a budget accountable. And something we're trying to do is connect. We do a lot of what we call budget 101s to try to teach people how the New York City budget works, but the documents themselves are not, they're management documents. They're not meant to provide transparency in terms of, this budget credibility or whether, we've been trying to think of how we teach about the budget is going to, and again, with inspirations from the IBP of thinking about the way a person experiences a service. So we're looking a lot towards childcare, which was also on, one of the three big policy areas that Zoran ran on. But, looking at how childcare is experienced and then trying to elevate into where in the budget you can see the bureaucracy that the budget funds, right? Because we're thinking of it as service is provided by a bureaucracy that's funded by the budget. And so where can we like look into the budget, but starting from the service first? And I'll give an example. And sorry, I don't know as much about the gender violence space, but we've been looking at childcare. And we look at even simple terms like in New York City, childcare can be provided by a community budget organization or the Department of Education. And what does that matter if you see that in your district? Well, the CBO has pay parity issues where the women in a community-based organization is not paid as well as when they're under the Department of Education. So then women are constantly flowing out to the Department of Education where they should be to, you know, provide the service. But then that means if in your area is served more by what we are called CBO childcare, they're more likely to be unreliable. They are more likely to shut down. They're more, you know, and so there's these terms that may seem part of this bureaucracy that's hard to interpret, but they have real world implications. So you can at least then try to advocate for more either pay parity to stabilize those community-based organizations or increase seats in the Department of Education landscape. So those are some of the ways that we're trying to then find, okay, where is that budget, you know, portioned out in the actual documents? And they can be hard to see because on the one hand, an agency commissioner wants flexibility in how to spend their monies, but then the person receiving the service wants to know, well, what am I experiencing with that service? And so I think that's something that we're like, you know, what I can hope is that because Mamdani run on a very like listening to people, I think it's going to have to translate into how the documents are also written and published. But you need, to your point of partnering with government, you need government buy-in because I think of the budget documents as the infrastructure to even being able to provide transparency, no matter who is in charge. But it requires definitely buy-in for that. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Tanya. That was great. We've run out of time, but I just want to make two comments before we leave this room. Firstly, I want to thank IBP for partnering with us on this. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you, and of course the governments of Malawi and Spain for coming here and providing the global perspective, but also the inspiration from the local perspective, and of course Faith from Girls Stop Brides for your kind of inspiring work, and I've been following your work for many years. So thank you so much for coming. There will be a recording of the session. I believe IBP is doing a recording, and we would love to share it with all of you and keep you on our mailing list going forward. But this has been a fascinating conversation. I hope you will all agree, and we've sadly run out of time, but just to say that we will continue this discussion, whether it's online or via email. But what I really took from this session, of all the CSW sessions that I've been so far, is there are solutions, even in the bleakest of times, in the bleakest of moments. So I hope we can feel a little bit energized by that and to support one another for finding even more solutions.
One sentence.
Sure.
Just to say that my colleague Priyanka has been very involved in doing this, and she cannot be here because the world is messed up and with all the conflicts, travel. So I want to recognize all the women, especially that cannot be here today and that have put all so much work into it. She would have provided so many perspectives, and we are here trying to do our best. But I think it's important to recognize that for her, but for many other women, of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.